Hello Smarties, thanks for being here. Today I recommend My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney for fans of high-speed mystery thrillers.
Wow.
What?
Talking about mysteries, why don't you look human?
Oh, well, I kinda get hit with the ugly stick sometimes.
The what?
It's a phrase I've heard growing up in Texas. Anyway, so I might have used too much of the retouch feature in CapCut. Sorry? Anywho, this episode is brought to you by Control. If you don't have self-control, birth control. My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney, copyright 2025, Diggi or Diggi Books Limited. Also credited are Macmillan Publishers and Flatiron Books. The first line of the book is crucial. This is supposed to be true for every story, but it's especially important in this book. The story does become a whodunit, but it starts as a who is it. The tense is present, the perspective is first person, which feels intimate and limits the reader's knowledge. This is a good choice for thrillers or mysteries like The Thin Man, because you can surprise the audience as the lead gets surprised by revelations and twists. What's clever about the opening is that we kind of have an action plus narrative combination going on. Supposedly it's best to start a story with action, especially in the mystery genre, and the author does this in the form of someone's jog through town. We physically move with her, seeing where she lives, and we read her thoughts to get to know her at the same time. Compared to a movie, the content of Feeney's book is about an R rating, so definitely not for kids and teens, though how you raise them is up to you, not me. Lots of cussing, which most people don't care about anymore, but in case you do, I wanted to keep you informed. Most importantly, there is some violence and about 4 or 5 bedroom scenes that are super steamy. However, it felt like the author was flipping off the regular Hollywood style scenes where the bedroom is all about the man and they're trying to teach the audience what Disney and Nickelodeon probably do to their child stars. So the romance in this book was unique for me because during the steamy scenes, I kept thinking, huh, well, isn't that man being so nice to her? But I'm not trying to be vulgar, that's all I'll say. First of all, do not read the last pages first. It might sound obvious, but I say this because a bibliophile I knew said she decides which books to buy based on whether the first and last pages interest her. But y'all, most of the secrets and plot twists are completely given away in the last 15 pages or so, and the last section changes everything. I don't mean the last chapter, I mean the last segment, which is titled My Husband's Wife. Alright, I've given y'all fair warning. When I reviewed Intervention by Terri Blackstock and The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, I used Plot and Structure by James Scott Bell to create a kind of rubric and compare the novels with the expectations set by the mystery genre. So let's talk about how Alice Feeney's novel holds up to that same standard, which makes it super enjoyable. Size. My Husband's Wife is only 307 pages long. That's a decent and almost short length for a mystery, and it brings us to quality number 2, plot and pacing. Because of the breakneck speed, those 307 pages will not take you very long to finish. Almost every page serves the story, even when there are some wordy internal processing moments. Unpredictable. Unless y'all have read tons of books with like a dozen plot twists at the end, I think you'll be just as surprised as I was by most of the unpredictable revelations and connections. POV clarity. God bless her for doing this. Feeney writes from so many characters' points of view, and every chapter is simply named for the character whose mind we are currently in. Focus. Even though there are thoughts regarding past events which help us understand what's really going on, the focus is usually on the current timeline and character building through their actions and reactions. Because the author kept her focus on the current plot, this means we don't get distracted by a super long flashback scene, like the one that I wrote in my first draft of my sequel. Yeah, I had a 5,000 word flashback in my 2-part mystery that I'm revising. Then I learned what info dripping is, and I fixed that. Likeable leads. About that. In Intervention, I was in love with Barbara and Kent, but in My Husband's Wife, everyone ends up being despicable. Once you get to the end, you might disagree with me, and that's fine, but to me, the likable quality of the book is just in how mysterious it is. Clear goals. Kind of. There are some clearly stated goals, though you might call them a little misleading, and the reader follows the characters on their quest to reach those goals, but there are some big, private goals that the reader doesn't learn about until the end. Scene variety. Plot and structure lists 4 chords of a scene: action, reaction, setup, and deepening. To me, there was a good balance of those 4 throughout the book, so you see stuff happen and how the characters handle it, how they feel and how they treat people, and some of their preferences and hobbies. Pressure and time limits. Yes! That breeze feels really good.
Easily distracted.
In addition to solving a crime ASAP, there's another clock ticking for one of the main characters. This means we have external and internal pressure, and we feel like we're sprinting to the finish line with the characters. Addictive chapter endings. Initially, each chapter closes with an attention-grabbing question or a surprise, which makes us want to keep turning pages. Then the author starts beginning chapters with statements that echo the way the previous chapter ended. What? What I mean is, chapter 33 ends this way: I have something very important that I need you to do. Then 34 begins with someone else thinking, it's so important that I do the right thing. Chapter 47 ends, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Chapter 48 begins, my life is a series of mistakes. Here are some other examples. That method seemed like a really carefully planned, clever detail, which I liked. After several endings and beginnings that echo each other this way, chapters 60 and 61 play a darkly humorous contrast. 60 ends, seconds later, my world fades to black. 61 begins, the future is looking a lot brighter all of a sudden. Character sympathy. The only person I felt bad for was Gabriella, of course, because I'm not a sociopath. Beyond that, I felt like everyone was a scumbag. Complex villain. The complexity really lies in how dishonest everyone is being. Beyond that, their motives are just very selfish. Info dripping. Yep. The author adeptly gives us clues through each narrator, and when we read it through the lens of the first line in the book, it's very helpful. Location and mood. Feeney doesn't bore us with purple prose. Instead, she creates quick, amazing, immersive description, like a network of narrow lanes and cobbled streets tightly packed with tiny terraced houses and quirky independent shops lead us downhill to the seafront. Also, there are some secret details to the landscape that play an important part. Character growth. I would say no. This is not about people becoming better people. Everybody starts out pretty complex, and they strive to get what they want, and that's how they stay. So after a few days of reflection, I actually think there might have been arguably some character growth, because one of the characters changes her mind about her actual life. However, she did stay despicable, in my opinion. No deus ex machina. Correct, there's not a simple, boring twist that rescues everybody. The resolution actually hinges on how dishonest everyone is willing to be. Other thoughts. One of my favorite lines is, the present is only ever the past in the making. This feels inspiring, sort of like the quote I saw one time online. Do something now that your future self will thank you for. At the end of chapter 54, there's a good example of how to break a writing rule well. A character peeks at a text and thinks, my eyes can't read the words fast enough. Normally we hear, don't use body parts in action statements. Don't say, my arms reach for the door. Just say, I reach for the door. But admit it, when Feeney wrote, my eyes can't read the words fast enough, it makes you feel it. You can imagine your own eyes trying to scan a text real quick. So when an author deliberately breaks a writing rule, if it doesn't make the book confusing, it's a sign of deep understanding of the craft. My leg is falling asleep. Now, what I'm about to say could make a less smart person than you angry, but you're very smart, so I know you'll be fine. After you finish the book, give it a few days, think about it, and at that point, you might still disagree with me, but I think you'll understand why this is my opinion. First of all, I'm not saying that the author intended to make me think these two things. This is just how my brain interpreted it. So here we go. Especially after the last section, after the final chapter, I believe that one of the tragedies wouldn't have happened if not for a one-night stand where neither person used self-control or birth control. And number two, the other tragedy, which sparked the whole issue, wouldn't have happened if not for an extramarital affair. I have way more thoughts on those two things, but I'm trying to keep this short. Again, I'm not saying I'm correct, it's just my opinion. And when you finish reading the story, let it sit with you a couple days and you might know what I mean. In photos online, it's hard to see this, but the key design on the front cover looks almost 3D, which is kind of fun. It's a nice detail. Also, I couldn't find any typos. I usually do. That probably doesn't sound impressive, but it's true. I find typos really easily. easily, and they bug me so bad. But the printing quality and editing of this book are both amazing. Not gonna lie, I got excited when Olivia says she lives above a bookstore dedicated to all things Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In real life, it's easy to feel like we've fallen down a rabbit hole into a world of weirdness and insane people. That's one of the reasons I've always loved those stories. And Olivia mentions feeling pulled down a rabbit hole a couple times too. Of course, as a Lewis Carroll slash Charles Dodson nerd, I appreciated the reference. I love this quote. Maybe the world would be less sad if people cared a bit more. Sentence length variety. Something that made the book super fun for me was the sentence length variety. Example, in chapter 8, she says, there are no neighbors, no traffic, no one, and nothing at all. BookFox always recommends choosing sentence structure and length deliberately to keep your readers interested and to make the reading, honestly, easy for us. And Feeney does this, which makes the reading more fun, smooth, and immersive. No info dumping. The closest thing to info dumping that you could accuse Feeney of is when characters are internally processing stuff that they're upset about, which feels like telling instead of showing what they've been through and who they are. But that kind of telling instead of showing is still interesting when it's written well. And yes, in chapter 31, someone does have a type of expositional dialogue when they reveal something about a character who is a kind of a tough cookie. But the reader already suspected such after being in all these characters' minds. So it wasn't cheesy or wasted time for the reader. It was just confirming what we already thought, and it led to a heated argument between the two characters, which maintained the conflict between them. I'm pretty sure most of my questions were answered in the climax. And by the way, the guy who whistled at the dog, that will make sense at the end too. Okay, I hope this helps you decide if you want to read the book. Thanks for watching. Remember, compassion is love plus action. Have a great day.